Before you scroll away, before your thumb moves even a single centimeter toward the next video, I need you to give me 4 minutes of silence, not 4 minutes of half attention while you check a notification. 4 full minutes where it is just you, me, and the truth neither of us likes to say out loud, because what I am about to tell you is not motivation. It is not a quote you will screenshot and forget by tomorrow morning. It is something heavier. It is the thing you already know, deep inside, but have been too busy, too tired, or too afraid to admit to yourself. And by the end of this, you will not be the same person who pressed play. Let me start with a question that sounds simple, but will follow you for the rest of your life. If you actually let it in, when was the last time you were completely honest with yourself? Alone, in a quiet room, with no one watching, and no phone in your hand. Not honest about your goals or your 5-year plan. Honest about who you actually are underneath the roles you play. The employee, the son or daughter. The friend who always says, "I'm fine." The person who smiles in photographs while something inside them has been quietly breaking for years. Most people go their entire lives without ever answering that question, because answering it requires stopping, and stopping is the one thing our world has trained us never to do. We wake up already reaching for the phone. We measure our worth in replies and likes before our feet have even touched the floor. We fill every silence with noise because silence forces us to hear ourselves. And most of us are terrified of what we might hear, so we run. We call it being busy. We call it hustling. We call it ambition. But if you strip away the language we use to make it sound noble, what you find underneath is often just fear wearing the costume of productivity. I want you to sit with that for a second, because it matters more than anything else I will say today. Fear does not always look like fear. Sometimes it looks like a packed calendar. Sometimes it looks like a person who says yes to everyone except themselves. Sometimes it looks like scrolling for 3 hours because the moment you stop, a question rises up from somewhere you cannot name. A question like, is this really it? Or, am I actually living? Or just surviving in a nicer outfit? And the moment that question appears, most of us reach for the phone again. Because facing that question sober, in full daylight, without distraction, feels unbearable. But here is what nobody tells you when you are young. When you are still collecting achievements like they are proof that you matter, the noise never actually protects you. It only delays the conversation you were always going to have with yourself. One day, whether you are 25 or 45 or 70, life slows down enough, or breaks you down enough, that the noise stops working. Maybe it is a diagnosis. Maybe it is a person you loved, walking out of a door for the last time. Maybe it is simply lying awake at 3 in the morning, staring at a ceiling that has heard every unspoken fear you have ever had, and realizing that you have spent years building a life you do not even recognize as your own. I am not telling you this to frighten you. I am telling you this because I would rather you hear it now, from a voice you cannot see. In a moment, you chose to stay and listen, than have life force it on you later, when you have far less time and far fewer choices left. This is the gift hiding inside discomfort. Discomfort is not your enemy. Discomfort is the only honest messenger you have left, because everything else in your life has learned to lie to you gently. Your habits lie to you by pretending they are harmless. Your distractions lie to you by pretending they are rest. Your fear lies to you by pretending it is caution. But discomfort, real discomfort, the kind that keeps you up at night, never lies. It simply says, something here is not right, and you already know it. So let us not run from it today. Let us sit inside it together for the next 20,000 words, because I promise you, On the other side of this conversation, something in you will loosen, not because I have magic answers. I don't. Nobody does. But because there is a strange kind of relief that comes from finally naming the thing you have been avoiding. Naming it does not fix it immediately. But naming it is the first act of freedom you will ever perform for yourself. And freedom, real freedom, always begins with a single honest sentence spoken in the dark. Here is mine, and I want you to borrow it if you need to. I have spent years of my life performing a version of myself that I thought other people wanted, and somewhere along the way, I forgot how to ask what I actually wanted. If that sentence lands anywhere inside you, even a little, do not close this. Stay. Because what comes next is going to change the way you carry yourself for the rest of your days, and I am not exaggerating when I say that. There is a particular kind of loneliness that has nothing to do with being alone. You can be surrounded by people, at a party, in a family gathering, in a group chat that never stops buzzing, and still feel a loneliness so deep, it feels like drowning in a crowded room. This is the loneliness of not being known, not the loneliness of empty space, but the loneliness of being seen only for the mask, never for the face underneath it. And I think, if we are honest, most of us are living inside that exact loneliness right now, and we have simply gotten so used to it that we no longer notice the weight of it. The way you stop noticing the hum of a refrigerator until someone finally unplugs it and the silence feels almost violent. Think about how many people know the version of you that shows up on time, says the right things, laughs at the right moments, and never asks for too much. Now think about how many people know what actually keeps you up at night. How many people know the specific shape of your fear? How many people have seen you on your worst day, not performing resilience? Not saying, "I'll be okay," but simply falling apart without apology. If the number is small, or if the number is 0, I want you to know something important. That is not because you are unlovable. That is because somewhere along the way, you learned that being fully seen was dangerous. And so you built a smaller, safer version of yourself to offer the world instead. Nobody teaches us this lesson directly. Nobody sits a child down and says, "From now on, hide your softness," because softness gets hurt, but we learn it anyway. In fragments, through moments that felt small at the time, but carved themselves permanently into how we relate to other people. The time you cried and were told to stop being dramatic. The time you shared a dream and someone laughed, not cruelly, just carelessly. And something in you quietly decided never to share that dream again. The time you needed someone and they were not there, and you told yourself, silently, that needing people was a weakness you could no longer afford. Each of these moments is small on its own, but stacked together over years, they build a wall so tall that even the people who love you most cannot always see over it. And the tragic irony is this: the wall you built to protect yourself from being hurt is the same wall that now prevents you from ever being truly held. I want to be careful here, because I am not telling you that vulnerability is easy, or that you should walk around exposing every wound to every stranger. That is not wisdom. That is just a different kind of self-harm. What I am saying is much quieter than that. I am saying that somewhere in your life, there is probably at least one person, maybe only one, who has earned the right to see you without the mask. And you have not given them that chance yet, because giving it to them means admitting that you are not as fine as you have been pretending to be. And admitting that feels like failure, when in truth, it is the opposite. It is the beginning of being known, which is the only real cure for the particular loneliness we started this section with. Let me tell you something about pain that took me far too long to understand, and that I wish someone had told me plainly, instead of letting me discover it the hard way. Pain is not the opposite of a good life. Pain is not proof that something has gone wrong with you, or that you are somehow failing at existing while everyone else seems to have it figured out. Pain is simply the sensation of growth happening faster than your identity can keep up with. Every single person you admire, every person whose calm presence or quiet strength you envy from a distance, was built inside a season of pain they did not choose and would never have chosen. The difference between them and the person still drowning in their pain is not that they suffered less. It is that at some point they stopped asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and started asking, "What is this trying to teach me?" And that single shift in the question changes everything about how pain moves through a human life. I know how that sounds. I know it can sound like a nice sentence stitched together to make suffering feel meaningful, when sometimes suffering is simply senseless and cruel, and there is no lesson hiding inside it that makes the loss worth it. I am not going to insult your intelligence by pretending every kind of pain has a silver lining. Some pain simply is. Some losses simply hurt, permanently, and no reframing will make them feel like gifts. But most of the pain that keeps you stuck, the pain of disappointment, of rejection, of falling short, of watching plans collapse, of being misunderstood by people you love, that pain almost always contains something for you if you are brave enough to stay with it, instead of numbing it away. Here is the test I use, and I offer it to you freely. The next time something painful happens, instead of immediately reaching for distraction, sit with the discomfort for just 10 minutes before you do anything else. No phone, no conversation, just you and the raw feeling. Unedited. Ask it one question. Ask, "What are you trying to show me?" You will not always get an answer immediately. Sometimes the answer arrives days later, in the shower, or on a walk, or in the strange clarity that comes right before sleep. But if you make a habit of asking instead of running, you will start to notice something remarkable. The same events that used to flatten you will begin to inform you instead. You will stop being a person things happen to, and start becoming a person who metabolizes what happens into wisdom. That shift alone is worth more than every productivity hack and morning routine combined, because it changes your relationship not just to hard days, but to your entire life. Now let us talk about time, because nothing exposes the truth of a life faster than an honest conversation about time. We treat time like it is infinite. We say things like someday and eventually, and when things calm down, as if calm is a season that will arrive on its own, uninvited, without us ever having to fight for it. But calm never arrives that way. Calm is not a gift the universe hands you once you have earned enough success or checked enough boxes. Calm is a decision you make in the middle of chaos, and if you do not make it deliberately, you will spend your entire life waiting for a permission slip that never comes. I want you to think, honestly, about how many years you have already spent waiting. Waiting to feel ready before starting the thing you actually want to do. Waiting to feel confident before speaking the truth you have been swallowing. Waiting to feel deserving before allowing yourself rest, or love, or joy that is not attached to an achievement. How many years have quietly disappeared while you were waiting to become a version of yourself that felt worthy of the life you actually want? And here is the brutal, liberating truth, hiding underneath that question. That version of you does not arrive by waiting. It arrives by acting, imperfectly, scared, unfinished, and becoming that person in motion, not in stillness. There is a strange trick our minds play on us regarding time. We imagine our future selves as almost a different species. Someone braver, someone calmer, someone who has finally sorted out all the things we have not sorted out yet. We imagine that this future self will do the things we are too afraid to do now. But that future self does not exist separately from you. That future self is built, day by day, out of the exact choices you are making today. In this very moment, as you listen to these words, if you keep avoiding the hard conversation today, your future self will still be avoiding it. Just older, just more practiced at avoidance, just further from the life you actually want. Time does not automatically make you brave. Time only makes permanent whatever pattern you keep repeating inside it. This is not meant to frighten you into anxious urgency, the kind that makes people burn out chasing goals that were never truly theirs to begin with. That is a different trap. Just as dangerous as procrastination, dressed up in the language of ambition. What I am asking for is something quieter and more honest. I am asking you to notice, without judgment, where in your life you have been waiting for permission that will never come. And to consider, gently, what it would mean to give that permission to yourself today, imperfectly, without waiting to feel ready. Because here is the truth about readiness. It is a myth. Nobody who has ever done anything meaningful with their life felt fully ready before they did it. The person who finally left the relationship that was slowly erasing them did not feel ready. The person who finally started the business, or the art, or the difficult conversation with an estranged parent did not feel ready. They felt terrified, and they did it anyway. Because at some point the pain of staying the same became heavier than the fear of change. That is usually how transformation actually happens in a human life. Not through sudden confidence, but through a quiet moment where the discomfort of staying stuck finally outweighs the fear of moving forward. I think about death more than most people are comfortable admitting. Not because I am morbid, but because thinking about death clearly is one of the only reliable ways to see life clearly. We spend so much energy avoiding the thought of our own ending, that we accidentally avoid the thought of our own living too. But if you allow yourself, just for a moment, to imagine standing at the very end of your life, looking back at everything, what do you think you will actually care about? Do you think you will care about the notifications you never got to answer? The perfect image you maintained for people who barely remember your name? The arguments you won just to prove a point? Or do you think you will care about the people you loved without hesitation? The truths you finally spoke instead of swallowing? The moments you were fully present instead of half distracted? The times you chose courage over comfort, even when no one was watching to applaud you for it? I suspect you already know the answer, because everyone does, deep down. The tragedy is not that we do not know what matters. The tragedy is that we know exactly what matters, and we still spend most of our days organizing our lives around what matters least. Because the things that matter most usually require the most courage, and courage is expensive, in a way that convenience never is. Let me speak now about failure, because I think we have all been lied to about what it actually means. Somewhere along the way, failure became a verdict instead of an event. We stopped saying, "I failed at this specific thing," and started saying silently, in the privacy of our own minds, "I am a failure." Do you see the difference? One is a sentence about an action. The other is a sentence about your entire identity. And once failure becomes identity instead of event, it stops being something you experienced and becomes something you are, permanently. In every room you walk into for the rest of your life. That is not truth. That is a story, and it is one of the most dangerous stories a human being can tell themselves. Because once you believe you are a failure, you stop taking the risks that could ever prove otherwise. I want you to think about a moment in your life when you fell short of something you wanted badly. Maybe it was a relationship that ended in a way you did not choose. Maybe it was an opportunity you were not given, or one you were given and could not hold on to. Maybe it was a version of yourself you tried to become and simply could not sustain. Now I want you to ask yourself honestly, in the aftermath of that failure, did you comfort yourself the way you would comfort a close friend going through the exact same thing? Or did you become your own harshest critic, saying things to yourself in the dark that you would never say out loud to anyone you loved? If you are like most people, the answer is the second one. And I think this reveals something important about how we have been taught to relate to our own struggling. We have been taught that self-criticism is what keeps us disciplined, that if we are not hard on ourselves, we will become lazy or complacent. But this is backwards. Shame does not produce growth. Shame produces hiding. When you shame yourself for failing, you do not become more motivated to try again. You become more motivated to protect yourself from ever feeling that exposed again, which usually means playing smaller, safer, and further from the life you actually want. Compassion. Real compassion, the kind you would offer a friend, does something entirely different. It says, yes, that hurt. Yes, you fell short, and you are still worthy of trying again. That sentence does not remove accountability. It does not pretend the failure did not happen, or that it does not matter. It simply refuses to let the failure become a life sentence. And I have noticed, in watching people who eventually build the lives they actually want, that almost all of them share this quality. They fail often, sometimes spectacularly, and they recover quickly, not because the failure hurts less for them, but because they have learned not to turn a single event into a permanent identity. I want to talk now about the masks we wear, because I think this is where so much of our quiet exhaustion actually comes from. Every day, most of us walk into rooms wearing a slightly adjusted version of ourselves. Softer here, sharper there. More agreeable in this room, more guarded in that one. This is not necessarily dishonest. Some adaptation is simply the price of living among other people. But there is a difference between adapting your behavior and abandoning your truth. And most of us crossed that line so long ago, and so gradually, that we no longer remember where the original, unedited version of ourselves actually lives. Think about how much energy it takes to maintain a mask. Think about how tired you feel after a day spent managing everyone else's comfort. Agreeing when you disagreed, smiling when you were hurting, staying quiet when you had something important to say. That exhaustion is not laziness. That exhaustion is the cost of self-abandonment, paid daily, in small invisible installments, until one day you look up and realize you have spent years being fluent in everyone else's needs and illiterate in your own. I am not telling you to become reckless with your honesty, to say every thought that crosses your mind regardless of the damage it might cause. That is not authenticity. That is just impulsivity wearing authenticity as a disguise. What I am asking is smaller and harder. I am asking you to start noticing the moments when you silence yourself out of fear rather than out of genuine care for the other person. There is a difference between staying quiet because speaking would cause unnecessary harm and staying quiet because speaking might cause you to be disliked. The first is wisdom. The second is the slow, quiet death of your own voice, one swallowed sentence at a time. Let us talk about love now. Real love, not the version sold to us in short clips, designed to make heartbreak look aesthetic and connection look effortless. Real love is not effortless. Real love is one of the most demanding things a human being will ever attempt, because it requires you to remain open in a world that has given you 1,000 reasons to close. Every person who has ever loved deeply has also been hurt deeply, because those two things cannot be separated. You cannot ask for a love with no risk of loss. The risk of loss is not a flaw in love. It is the very thing that makes it real. A love that costs you nothing was never love to begin with. It was simply comfort, and comfort, while pleasant, has never once changed a single human life. I think many of us have quietly, without ever announcing it even to ourselves, decided that the risk is no longer worth it, We have been hurt enough times, disappointed enough times, misunderstood enough times, that some part of us has started building a case for staying guarded. And I understand that instinct completely, because self-protection makes perfect sense on paper. If loving fully means risking pain, then loving less fully must mean risking less pain. But here is the quiet tragedy hiding inside that logic. The same walls that protect you from being hurt also protect you from being fully loved. You cannot selectively numb yourself. If you close the door to pain, you close the same door to joy, because they are not separate doors. They are the same door, and it only opens all the way or not at all. I have come to believe that the bravest thing a person can do is not the dramatic, cinematic kind of courage, the kind that gets applauded in movies. The bravest thing a person can do is stay open after being hurt, to love again after loss, to trust again after betrayal, to hope again after disappointment. Not naively, not without wisdom or boundaries, but genuinely, with your whole chest, knowing full well that it might not work out and choosing to try anyway. That is not weakness. That is the highest form of strength a human being is capable of, because it requires you to hold both the memory of your wound and the possibility of your joy in the same hand, without letting one destroy the other. And if you are someone who has closed that door, even slightly, even without meaning to, I want to gently ask you something. Who taught you that safety was more important than aliveness? Because I do not think you were born believing that. I think somewhere, some experience convinced you that it was safer to want less, to need less, to expect less, so that you could never be disappointed as badly again. And I understand why that belief formed. But I want you to consider, just for a moment, that the goal of a life well lived was never to avoid being hurt. The goal was to be so fully alive that being hurt becomes simply the cost of having loved something enough to matter. Fear deserves its own honest conversation, because fear is the quiet architect behind almost every unlived life. Not the dramatic fear of danger, but the low hum of fear that follows people through their ordinary days. The fear of being seen fully and rejected, the fear of wanting something badly and not getting it. The fear of trying and discovering that even your best effort was not enough. This fear rarely announces itself loudly. It disguises itself as practicality. It disguises itself as, I'm just being realistic. It disguises itself as waiting for a better time that never actually arrives. Because the better time was never about circumstances, it was always about courage. And courage does not wait for perfect conditions. It simply moves despite imperfect ones. I want you to notice something about the moments in your life you are most proud of. I would guess that almost none of them happened because you felt completely fearless. I would guess they happened because you felt afraid and you did the thing anyway. Trembling, unsure, uncertain of the outcome. That is what courage actually looks like in real life. It does not look like the absence of fear. It looks like fear sitting right next to you in the passenger seat while you keep driving toward the thing that matters. Anyone who tells you they achieved something meaningful without fear is either lying to you or has never actually attempted anything that mattered enough to risk failing at. Stay with me, because we are not finished. And what comes next might be the part you needed most. Even if you did not know it when you pressed play. I want to talk about purpose, but not in the way it is usually talked about. Not as some grand singular calling waiting to be discovered, like buried treasure. I think that idea of purpose has actually harmed more people than it has helped, because it convinces us that until we find this one perfect, obvious purpose, our lives remain somehow incomplete or in waiting. But purpose rarely arrives as a single lightning bolt of clarity. Purpose is usually built slowly, quietly, through the accumulation of small, honest choices, the same way a path through a forest is not built all at once. but worn into existence one footstep at a time by people willing to walk somewhere no one else has walked yet. If you are waiting to feel a dramatic, undeniable calling before you allow yourself to fully commit to something, you may be waiting your entire life. Most people who eventually find deep meaning in their work, or their relationships, or their creative pursuits, did not begin with certainty. They began with curiosity, a small, quiet interest that they were willing to follow, even without proof that it would lead anywhere important. And it was only in the walking, in the doing, in the showing up again and again through boredom and doubt, and slow progress, that the sense of purpose eventually revealed itself. Purpose is usually the reward for persistence, not the prerequisite for it. This matters because I think many of us are stuck, not because we lack purpose, but because we are demanding certainty before we are willing to commit. We want to know the ending before we are willing to take the first step. But life does not work that way, and it never has. You do not get to see the whole staircase before you decide to climb it. You only get to see the next step, and sometimes that is genuinely all you need, if you are willing to trust that clarity comes from motion, not from thinking your way into certainty while standing perfectly still. I also want to say something about the pressure to be exceptional, because I think this pressure quietly poisons far more lives than it improves. We live inside a culture that constantly celebrates extraordinary outcomes. The record breakers, the overnight successes, the people whose lives look, from the outside, like a highlight reel with no boring parts. And absorbing this constant stream of extraordinary examples can quietly convince you that an ordinary life, a life of steady work, quiet love, simple joys, and modest achievements, is somehow a failure by comparison. But I want to offer you a different way of seeing this. Most meaningful lives, the ones that actually matter to the people living them, and to the people who love them, are built from deeply ordinary moments. A meal cooked with care, a conversation where someone finally felt heard, a promise kept even when it was inconvenient, a child who felt safe because of the steady, unremarkable presence of a parent who simply showed up, day after day, without needing applause for it. You do not need to be extraordinary to live a life that matters. You need to be present, honest, and willing to keep showing up for the people and the work in front of you, even on the days it feels unremarkable. The extraordinary life, if it comes, is usually just the ordinary life practiced with consistency and integrity. Over a very long time, there is no shortcut around the ordinary. There is only the decision to bring your full presence to it, day after day, until the ordinary quietly becomes the foundation of something you are proud of. Now I want to talk about surrender, a word that sounds like defeat but is actually one of the most powerful tools a human being has ever discovered. We live in a culture obsessed with control. We are taught from very early on that if we just plan enough, work hard enough, optimize enough, we can engineer our way into a life free from uncertainty. And this belief works for a while, in small domains. You can control how many hours you study, how consistently you show up to the gym, how carefully you prepare for a meeting. But there is an entire category of life that refuses to bend to control, no matter how hard you try, and that category includes almost everything that actually matters most. You cannot control whether someone loves you back. You cannot control how long the people you love will stay alive. You cannot control the outcome of every risk you take, no matter how well you prepared for it. And the moment you understand this, really understand it, not as an abstract idea but as a felt truth in your body, something in you either breaks or softens. I have watched people break under this truth, becoming bitter, controlling, anxious, desperately trying to grip tighter onto the uncontrollable parts of life, as if enough force could finally make them obey. And I have watched other people soften under this exact same truth, learning instead to hold their plans, their hopes, their relationships, with open hands instead of clenched fists. This is what surrender actually means. It does not mean giving up on your goals or ceasing to care about outcomes. It means releasing your desperate grip on certainty and trusting that you can prepare fully, show up fully, love fully, without needing a guaranteed outcome to justify the effort. There is a peace available on the other side of that surrender that I do not think can be reached any other way. It is the peace of a person who has stopped fighting reality and started working with it instead. It is the peace of someone who has finally accepted that uncertainty is not a temporary obstacle standing between them and a stable life, but the actual permanent condition of being alive, and that stability was never found in controlling the uncontrollable. It was found in learning to stand steady inside the very uncertainty everyone else spends their whole life running from. I want to close this particular thread by talking about truth. Because everything we have discussed today, the loneliness, the pain, the time, the failure, the masks, the love, the fear, the purpose, the surrender, all of it eventually comes back to a single, simple, brutally difficult act. Telling yourself the truth. Not the version of the truth that is comfortable, not the version that protects your ego or excuses your avoidance. The actual unfiltered truth, spoken silently to yourself, in the quiet, when no one else is listening, and no one else will ever know if you lied. Here is why this matters more than anything else I could tell you today. Every unlived dream, every relationship you stayed in too long, every version of yourself you abandoned to please someone else, every year that quietly disappeared while you waited for permission, all of it was made possible by a small, private lie you told yourself somewhere along the way. A lie like, "It's not that bad." A lie like, "I'll deal with it later." A lie like, "This is just how life is." These lies are not malicious. They are usually acts of self-protection, ways of surviving a truth that felt too heavy to hold at the time. But lies, even protective ones, have a cost. And the cost is always paid later, usually with interest, in the form of a life that feels strangely unfamiliar, even though you are the one who built it. The good news, if there is good news hiding inside all of this, is that the truth is always available to you. It does not require anyone's permission. It does not require perfect circumstances. It only requires a willingness to stop in the middle of your noisy, busy, distracted life and ask yourself one honest question. Is this actually what I want? Or is this simply what I have gotten used to? That single question, asked sincerely and answered honestly, has the power to quietly rearrange an entire life. Not overnight, not dramatically, but steadily. The way a single degree of change in direction eventually leads a ship to a completely different shore. Want to talk now about self-worth, because I think this is the quiet root underneath almost every struggle we have discussed so far. So much of our exhaustion, our people-pleasing, our fear of rejection, our inability to rest without guilt, traces back to a single unspoken belief that most of us carry without ever examining it directly. The belief that our worth must be earned, that we are only valuable to the extent that we produce, achieve, perform, or please. This belief usually forms early, often in childhood when love and attention felt conditional on behavior, on grades, on being easy, on not causing trouble. And once that belief takes root, it quietly governs an entire life, whispering that rest must be earned through exhaustion, that love must be earned through usefulness, that simply existing without producing anything is somehow not enough. I want to offer you a different frame, not as a slogan to repeat in the mirror, but as something to actually sit with and test against your own experience. Your worth was never something you had to earn, because worth, real worth, is not a performance metric. It is the baseline condition of being a conscious creature, capable of love and suffering and hope. A newborn baby has done nothing to earn love, has produced nothing, has achieved nothing. And yet we consider that baby infinitely worthy of care and protection. That worth does not evaporate as the baby grows into a child, then an adult, simply because the world starts attaching conditions to it. The conditions are the lie. The inherent worth was always the truth, buried underneath years of being taught otherwise. If you have spent your life proving your worth through achievement, I want you to consider an uncomfortable question. What would happen if you stopped, even for a week, and simply existed without producing anything impressive? Would you still consider yourself valuable? If the honest answer is no, that reveals something important. Not a flaw in you, but a wound that was placed there by circumstances outside your control. A wound that is now asking, quietly, to finally be examined, instead of endlessly medicated with more achievement.